Their power to waiting lounge homed like a massive beehive, filled with a chorus of voices, laughter, and endless announcements over the loudspeaker. A woman sat in a metal chair by a large panoramic window, trying to appear calm. But her fingers betrayed her inattention. They traced the handle of her letter bag, then instinctively fidgeted with the edge of the scarf on her lap. Time dragged on, yet замедлилась, even as the electronic flyboard updated every minute. She watched families hugging and saying their goodbyes before boarding, businessmen with their laptops, and mothers busy with their children, gathering toys and snacks. It all seemed so ordinary and a word away from her own reality. Her world had shrunk to a single moment. The meeting with the man she was here for, the man she was terrified to even think about out loud. A dangerous secret. Her boss husband. The very words burned her heart. She caught herself looking round to Aufren, afraid of meeting HAS Gazi too soon, afraid that someone else might sit around together and understand more than they should. She tried to keep busy. She pulled a book from her bag and appended it to a random page, but the letters blurred into a solid mess. No matter how hard she tried to concentrate, her thoughts stubbornly returned to one question: what happens next? The vacation felt like a trap she had willingly walked into. On the surface, everything looked perfectly respectable. It was an official trip, the tickets were bought, and the documents were in order. But deep down, she knew this was more than just a getaway. It was a test of her strength, her boundaries, her ability to keep a secret. Every sound in the lounge made her flinch. When the boarding call for the flight to Paris was announced, she closed her eyes for a moment, imagining that this wasn't happening to her, that it was some other person flying with a man that not a single one of her steps, not a single one of her thoughts, should ever touch. But reality instantly pulled her back. She looked down at her hands and noticed they were trembling. Get a grip, she ordered herself silently. Inhale, eagerly. She tried to smile, to somehow deceive her own fear. But in that instant, something completely unexpected happened. A mysterious warning. Somione's fingers touched her hand. It was a light, careful touch, as if by accident, but far too distinct to be dismissed as mere chance. Her skin reacted instantly. A chill ran through her veins, and her breath caught in her throat. She whipped her head round, her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to break free. Everything inside her froze. She was certain she would see him beside her, the man she was waiting for. But instead, a completely different figure stood before her. A stranger was so close she could catch the faint, sharp, and barely perceptible scent of HAS cologne. He was a head taller than her, dressed in a dark coat, with a weary face that seemed both foreign and strangely familiar. HAS eyes lingered on her face just a fraction longer than politicians would allow. This prolonged, almost insistent attention made her heart beat even faster. She wanted to say something, but the words were stuck in her throat. It felt as if time had stopped. The noise of the airport faded away, the voices grew distant, and all that remained was HAS Gazi and the touch on her hand, which continued to burn her skin even after the stranger removed HAS palm. Her fingers were still trembling from the unexpected touch when the stranger leaned slightly toward her. He looked like he was in a hurry, yet HAS movements held a sort of hidden resolve. HAS face was pale with sharp cheekbones and dark circles under HAS eyes, as if he hadn't slept in several nights. But the most striking thing was HAS Gazi wasn't just curious or random. It was too attentive, as if he knew everything about her. You need to be more careful, he said in a quiet, almost whispering voice. The words were spoken so quickly that at first, she thought she had misheard. "I'm sorry," she asked, but he didn't repeat himself. The stranger glanced round the hall. HAS eyes scanned the people at the check-in counter, the security guards, the surveillance cameras under the ceiling. He looked as if he knew they were being watched. Then, he slowly pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of HAS coat and placed it directly into her palm. HAS hand lingered on her fingers for just a second, but it was enough to make her heart plummet again. "It's not safe here," he said, even more quietly. Without waiting for her reaction, he turned and dissolved into the stream of people. She sat as if she were glued to the chair, her mind reeling. She clutched her back to her chest and held the envelope tightly in her fingers, terrified someone would see it. People walked past, laughing and talking. Someone was pulling a rolling suitcase, someone else was buying coffee at a nearby kiosk. Everything looked normal, but her world had been turned upside down in a matter of seconds. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. There was no money or documents inside. There was only a small piece of paper with a short phrase, written hastily, as if in a rush. He knows everything. Don't trust anyone. Her breath hitched. The words seared her mind. He knows everything. But who was he? Her boss husband. Or someone else who was watching her. She felt cold sweat form on her forehead. It seemed as though someone was standing right behind her, staring at her back. She slowly turned round. Just ordinary people, families, a young couple with backpacks, a businessman on the GS phone. Everything looked so mundane that she wanted to lean through the note Rui, but her heart knew it wasn't a joke. She clutched the envelope and took a deep breath. Now, every moment felt dangerous. A tense arrival. And at that very moment, he walked into the hall her boss husband. He walked with a confident stride, standing out among the other passengers. He was tall, with an impeccably tailored suit that held its shape even while traveling. BTS face was calm, but HS's eyes were as cold as steel. They always held a hint of superiority, and it was that look that always made her feel small and helpless. He spotted her immediately. A smile appeared on HS's face, a smile too perfect, too forced. She knew that behind that smile, there was always something else: calculation, exasperation, control. He came close, too close for a formal meeting. His hand slid round Natalie's waist, and she barely suppressed a shiver. To anyone watching, they might have looked like a couple, and that was the essence of HS's dangerous game. "Were you waiting for me?" he asked, with HS's voice close to her ear. Her throat was dry. She tried to smile, but her lips would barely obey. Of course, she managed to force out. Everything inside her was screaming that this meeting was a trap. The envelope in her bag burned like a piece of red metal. She was afraid he would notice her trembling, hear her racing heart, sense her fear. "Good," he said, with a face lingering on her face for a moment. "I'm glad." But there was no joy in HS's voice. GT carried an undertone, as if he truly knew more than he was supposed to. They walked to the check-in counter together. He strode confidently, speaking to the airline employee in a level voice, asking questions about the luggage. She walked beside him like a shadow, feeling like a prisoner of the situation. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him in the reflection of a glass partition the stranger. He was standing a little way off to the side, but HS's gaze was once again fixed only on her. This time, he didn't move, only gave a slight shake of HS's head, as if to warn her. The woman froze. Her heart hammered, and she almost stopped breathing. The world around her kept moving announcements, bustling travelers, rolling suitcases. But in her reality, there were only two people: the one walking beside her, who perhaps knew too much, and the one watching from the shadows, warning her of imminent danger. She knew one thing for sure: her vacation would be no vacation. It would be a trial where everything could depend on her decisions. The fly. At the check-in counter, the surrounding chats felt like the set of a thriving play in which she was forced to play a role she wasn't ready for. Her boss husband spoke to the young woman at the desk with a confident tone. BTS's voice was cold and commanding, as always. He asked about window seats, luggage, and boarding times. Meanwhile, she stood beside him, trying to keep her back straight and her face calm, though everything inside her was coiling into a tight knot. She couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. She felt a heavy, relentless gaze. At first, she thought it was just paranoia, but when she glanced at the glass partition opposite the room, she saw HS's reflection. There, among the crowd, stood the stranger in the coat. HS's silhouette stood out even in the crowd. He didn't approach or make any gestures, he just looked directly at her. Their eyes met through the reflection, and for a second, her heart skipped a beat. He shook HS's head slowly, a movement so subtle it could have been accidental. But she knew it was a sign. A warning. She quickly looked away, terrified that her companion would notice her attention on another man. Luckily, he was too busy talking to the employee to pay her any mind. But the tension inside her grew to its breaking point. She felt the strip morphing into something else, a trap, an ordeal. And she didn't know which direction the danger was coming from, the man beside her, or the mysterious stranger who had twice invaded her life in the last few minutes. "You look a little pale," her boss husband said suddenly, turning to her. "Yes, I swear like ice. Did something happen?" She flinched. Her lips trembled, but she forced a smile. "Just tired," she lied. "The travel, the waiting, all of it. He stared into her face for a few seconds, as if trying to see through the lie. She was afraid he could hear how frantically her heart was beating. But then he nodded and returned to Vichay's conversation with the woman at the counter. She let out a breath, but she knew this was only the beginning. At that moment, her life had been split into a before and an after. When they boarded the plane, the tension multiplied. The metal gangway, the narrow rows of seats, the smell of dreadful meat with passengers' perfume all seemed to press down on her. Each step felt like a step into a snare. She took the seat by the window. Her palms were damp, and she quickly wiped the air on her skirt, hoping he wouldn't notice. The man sat down next to her and calmly opened the inflict magazine as if everything was perfectly normal. Bichay's calmness was the most raving thing of all. It was too deliberate, too strained. She tried to distract herself, looking out the window at the runway where planes moved one after another, but inside, she felt no peace. And then Bichay's voice sounded right next to her ear. "You think I don't know anything?" Her body was paralyzed. She didn't turn her head, afraid to meet Bichay's eyes. Her throat went dry. Her heart stopped for a moment. The words weren't a question, they were a verdict. Before she could answer, a flight attendant approached the royal tall man in a crew uniform with a flawless smile. He leaned over to check the overhead bins, and Bichay's eyes met hers. For a second, her breathing stopped. It was him. The stranger. He didn't give himself away with a single movement or word. Bichay's face remained professional calm. But when he reached out, supposed to adjust her seatbelt, Bichay's fingers once again brushed her palm. Something small and folded slipped into her hand. She clenched it in her fist as the flight attendant, with the same impeccable expression, moved on down the aisle. The man beside her either didn't notice anything as suspicious or pretended not to. The woman unfolded the note under the armrest, trying to make her movements discreet. There were only a few words: "You won't make it if you stay with him." Her heart pounded so hard she nearly dropped the piece of paper. The words pierced through her. She looked up at her boss husband. He was calmly flipping through the magazine, Bichay's face unreadable. But now, Bichay's every gesture, Bichay's every movement seemed deadly. The plane began to accelerate down the runway. The engines roared, and the cabin shuddered with vibration. People around the room chattered excitedly. Some closed their eyes, anticipating sleep, others took pictures of the takeoff. But she sat frozen, trapped between panic and the stranger's mysterious warning. This wasn't a vacation. It was the beginning of something much bigger. And she had no idea if she would get out of this gamer life.